Thank you very much. First of all, I'm a proud Litvak. I'm a proper Litvak. I'm proud about it. And I want to relate to your words, Edley. Firstly, my wife, her father's Greek and her mother's Moroccan. So my sons are definitely Moroccan Litvaks. They must be. And Greek Litvaks. So that. They don't. And by the way, I think we were in the army together, but that we'll talk about afterwards. Right. I still need this. So my name is Len Judes, and I am the chairman of the Israel-Lithuania Chamber of Commerce, Israel-Lithuania Technology Hub, and that's definitely not what I came to discuss. Some of you who have a sensitive ear will probably recognize a South African accent, albeit that I've never lived a day of my life in South Africa. I'm Israeli, born in London, but South African ancestry. So because we're short on time, instead of just talking, I'll actually read and be focused, like we were told today to be focused. I'll be focused. Growing up as a lad and as a young man, Lithuania was something beyond the horizon. It was a place which was more of an old mystery, not a real physical country. The Iron Curtain put Lithuania beyond real access as part of the USSR, which we Westerners couldn't really visit. However, it was actually more than that. I'm already the third generation out of Lithuania. All four grandparents of mine were born in South Africa. They were born to immigrant parents who at the time had recently arrived in South Africa around the turn of the 20th century. The new immigrants made a new life for themselves in this new foreign land, full of animals and bushes and very, very different to Vilnius, I can tell you, or Lithuania. While maintaining very much of a Litvak heritage, the Yiddish they spoke at home was Litvak Yiddish. The food they ate was Litvak kosher food, of course. So the traditions and heritage prevailed in South Africa. Now, South Africa was definitely not, from a number point of view, numerically, wasn't necessarily the largest community. But what makes South Africa so different is that 90% of the Jewry of South Africa was from Lithuania, Litvaks. That's an anomaly. There's no such, any other place in the world we have such a big concentration. In other words, the Jewish community of South Africa is a direct continuation of the Lithuanian, the Litvak Jewish community. That's unique. And of course, most of them immigrated well before the war, and that's how actually this community survived. It's quite interesting that as we speak, recently, literally a month ago, there's a group of young Lithuanian film directors and students that actually that discovered this unbelievable story of these people from Lithuania who went to Africa and studied it and actually are, as we're speaking, or last month at least, filming a documentary in South Africa about the Litvak community. But they're a little bit behind times in the sense that it's a very dynamic world, and immigration is intense. And in fact, if you really want to be with it and accurate, immigration out of South Africa over the years has been growing all the time. And just recently, the Jews of Australia today, the majority are South African Litvaks. They've overtaken the indigenous Australian Jews, many of which were from Hungary, by the way. Today, there are more Litvaks, South African Litvaks in Australia than actual Australian Jews. So that's the next place to do a documentary, I suppose. Anyway, getting back to my story, this evolution of the South African, the Litvak community in South Africa, as I say, continued. But the focus there was adaptation to South Africa, to a new life, sports, Anglo-Saxon life in South Africa. Maintaining Yiddish and Litvak heritage continued. Certain sacrifices were made. The Sabbath, for example, wasn't quite adhered to as it was in the past. It was a new world, people had to make adaptations to it. The Haim, what we call the Haim, became a little bit obscure to that generation. What was there known about Lithuania? Not much. My grandparents and parents knew the names of the towns and the shtetls the families originated from. They knew a few of the names of the ancestors from previous generations, not much more than that. But then the Berlin Wall came crumbling down and the USSR dissolved. The internet revolutionized the world, all walks of life, and the world had changed. I admit to being slightly different to the rest of my close relatives, on both sides really, and the generations above a little bit, because of my curiosity about our Litvak heritage. I was very curious. Not only was I curious, but I actually was amazed how other people in my family weren't. To me, couldn't quite fathom that. My first interaction with modern-day Lithuania came about in the late 90s when I met a Lithuanian diplomat in a conference in Bucharest. I was there on business, and chatting to my neighbor seated next to me, discovered him to be the ambassador of Lithuania to Romania, amongst other countries. Danius, sitting right over there, Danius Junevicius, today of the Foreign Ministry of Lithuania. We've been good friends ever since then. And Danius did obviously note my curiosity and interest regarding Lithuania, having told him about my family and origins. Fast forwarding a decade, he introduced me to the new ambassador of Lithuania to Israel at the time, Asta Skaiskrite, who, knowing that I was from Lithuanian descent and that I'm a lawyer, and in fact at the time I was chairman of the Israel-Britain Chamber of Commerce, she engaged me to launch the Israel-Lithuania Chamber of Commerce, which I did gladly and which I've been chairing ever since then. In the interim period, 2007, my eldest son was 13 years old, bar mitzvah age, 7th grade, and he was saddled with a school project, as are all students of that age, to research his family roots, prepare family tree, interview his elders according to the given guidelines. This was an opportunity for me to research our family roots and learn our history. The findings I had were overwhelming. Thanks to relevant Jewish genealogy websites, an archive search, and further reading, I found a treasure. On my paternal side, my father's side, I managed to reconstruct our family tree to circa 1700. In 2009, with some relatives, I made a roots-seeking trip to Lithuania, to the towns from where the families originated, and came back with resounding findings, some of which were very sad. That was in relation to relatives who remained in Lithuania and who were murdered during the Holocaust. I also managed to find relatives dotted all over the world, which brought upon generation-old reunions with relatives spanning from a few kilometers from my house in Israel to the States, Scotland, England, Argentina even, and South Africa, of course. Some of the stories are incredible and form a part of the dramatic historical eventualities of and creation of the State of Israel as well. My interaction as chairman of the Israel-Lithuania Chamber of Commerce with modern-day Lithuania as well, I continued visiting over here, came often, and finding more and more historical facts about my family and deepened my engagement with Lithuania. I've been to Lithuania numerous times, and I found a very distant relative right here in Vilnius. He's now a close friend of mine, and as I say, that's been quite amazing. I've spoken in quite a few forums over here, spanning professional conferences to addressing high school students in Kėdainiai, where my grandmother's family came from. I've become familiar with the Litvak Jewish community in Lithuania and beyond, have become aware of the sensitivities and internal politics, and to the controversy surrounding the preservation of the Jewish heritage and memory in Lithuania. I have found myself confronted with criticism made by various Jewish organizations and historians when hosting at a chamber event a certain Lithuanian minister while visiting Israel. I've also experienced delicate, diplomatic, prickly encounters between the corresponding state representatives and organizations. At the business and economic levels, have participated in many engagements and have been challenged frequently as to how to make things work. Having this broad overview of matters and understanding through DNA, history, and facts, coupled with an emotional element which cannot and should not be denied or suppressed, I feel like a genuine piece of this puzzle called Lithuania. My view about the preservation of the Jewish heritage in Lithuania as a whole, and in Vilnius in particular, the great synagogue, with respect to the commemoration of it, is not driven by any interest other than the pure desire to preserve the memory of my ancestors, the people who lived in this land for many centuries. I'm not interested in being influenced by internal fighting and political bickering, which wasn't discussed today, but it is there in the background, we should know. It's not a question of a win-lose table, who might gain, and what measures to be taken. Obviously, everybody must be heard. A sensible and feasible solution of preserving the synagogue must be found. My personal view is that partial reconstruction of the synagogue, perhaps of those parts excavated and those which can easily be excavated in diggings, should be preserved and displayed on the real site. So much more than a plaque, significantly less than a reconstruction of the entire synagogue. Thank you very much.